everybody. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, November 4th, 2021 Watertown City Plan Commission. Can I get a roll call?
Yes. Dolly.
Here.
Case.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
Aletsky.
Present.
And Dolly, Hanson, Brink, Spire, Dargis Johnson, and Ford are absent. Oh, actually, sorry, I think Dargis Johnson might be online. Is that correct?
Randy, this is Jason Hanson. I'm on audio until I can get to the meeting.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me redo that there. So Hanson is present, and then it does not look like Dargis Johnson is online. She thought maybe she would be able to be. So that makes Brink, Spire, Dargis Johnson, and Ford absent. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is invitation for public comment participants submittal. If there's anybody there to speak in the room on an item that's not on the agenda tonight or online, go ahead and make that known. Moving on to item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion to approve.
Second, Culhane.
Motion and a second. Any additions or amendments to the agenda? We'll take a vote on that.
All right, Aletsky,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Case,
Yep.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. Agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Item 5A is from the October 7th, 2021 minutes. I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Aletsky,
Second, Case.
second by Case. Any additional discussion on those minutes? All right, if everything looks good, we'll take a vote on that.
All right, Aletsky,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Case,
I'll abstain.
Hanson,
Yes.
and Dolly.
Yes. Those minutes are approved. Moving on to item 6 is the regular agenda, and item 6A is the commission consideration of resolution number 2021-50, amending the zoning map of the city of Watertown for lots 1 through 6, block 2 of, now I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Ladouce first edition?
That works.
I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Blake. So,
Brandy, yep.
all right, thank you. So this property here, the lots 1 through 6, block 2 of, I've been pronouncing it Ladue edition, so whatever, Ladue. So this property is currently zoned C2 local commercial district, and what is being proposed is that it be rezoned to I1 light industrial. You can see the adjacent zoning districts surrounding the property. We have the city park over here. The north, there is the I-1, which does have the frontage with 3rd Avenue. And then to the east, there's additional C2, and then to the south, there's R2A. And so this property does meet the minimum square footage for an I-1 lot. It's 45,375 square feet, and you need 30,000 for an I-1 district, or for an I-1 lot. And then other things to note here would be in the comprehensive land use plan, it does support that this area would be redeveloped as I-1 for the future land use map. And I can zoom in there so we can see a little better. So in that area there, and then that is the industrial. And another thing to note is, okay, the area, I'll just go here. So this area that's zoned R2A was previously rezoned from C2. It was also zoned as C2. It was rezoned just because of the uses to make them conforming, and it was done in 2010. And the R2A was actually a closed district, but it was petitioned by the Plan Commission so that these properties could be brought into conformity. And so on the petition for this property here, 604 First Avenue Northwest, that's their the same reason for petitioning for the rezone, to bring it back to it's industrial in nature. So let me think if there's anything else. I think with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Can you access this building from 6th Street? Yes, you can, can't you?
Yep. So First Avenue, when we closed that rail crossing, then that was disconnected. And then but it does still loop through from 3rd Avenue to Kemp Avenue, utilizing 6th Street.
But still, First Avenue goes to that building too, right? It stops right there?
Yep.
And so the current and historic usage of this building has been for manufacturing type operation, right? So this request is really to bring the zoning in conformance with the historical use of the lot in the area.
Yes.
Brandy Hanson, do we know what the intended use is? I mean, why are we going from C to I?
So the applicant's agent is here, I believe, if he would like to speak on that.
Yeah, I'll open the public hearing. If you'd like to come forth and state your name for the record.
Yeah, this is Mike Lawrence. Whoa, that thing's hot. Mike Lawrence, Access Real Estate. Right now, currently that building has been used, even the buildings around it as far as the telephone company and the HVAC are more I-1 uses. We do have a couple interested parties interested in the building. It's going to be coming up for sale. And a building like that doesn't meet much of the C2 uses. It's an industrial building at its nature. It has loading docks on it. The usage isn't changing dramatically from what it's being used as, has been being used as. So that's what we're trying to do, get into conformance so we can sell it to somebody that's going to use the building for what they're going to use the building for, what the building's designed for, I guess. If that answered your question, Jason?
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned with the R2, with just a buffer between the R2 and the I zoning.
And just for some context, Jason, I mean, in this area, it was kind of developed this way. And actually, I looked back. So C2, has been zoned, this entire area was zoned C2 all the way back in 1992. But you can see kind of along the railroad how that is kind of, I would say, more of a concentric ring theory where they would do industrial and then like housing nearby. So we do have it in other areas. It is not ideal. However, then our comprehensive plan does show this area as being redeveloped as I-1, and that's probably with its proximity to the railroad.
I guess one thing I would point out, is the uses that are there as C2 have been allowed to be used for this amount of time. It is really close to the rail spur as far as the C2 goes in that neighborhood. If you look at the C2, nobody's putting a bank in there. And most of the uses that are in the C2 do not fit in that where that goes. My dad actually owns the land or 2 houses in that R2A, and he foresees, maybe that someday they'll be purchased by somebody who's going to be doing industrial, because he's in the 2 that are right by the phone company, and he's, it just makes more sense in that area with the train and the traffic of two rural connectors or busier streets on each side of it. So that was kind of, he owns half the block and Eachin owns the other half of the block. And I had a discussion with him and he thought his was already zoned I-1. He was very surprised to hear that he was in the C2 as well.
Is there a spur off of that already, or is it just is it straight through?
Straight through.
Is this a precursor to a spur? Is that what's going on?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said spur. I guess there's a railroad.
No, but
Yep.
I'm aware. I've got an idea where this is going, but I mean, is that where we're going? Is it going to rezone this whole thing as industrial, or?
I don't know. I'm only involved in the one parcel of land. Yeah, I don't have any. We don't have any client or anybody that's looking to use the railway as it is. It's just extremely close. You know, I don't. We have tenants in those that complain about that railway all the time.
I was just curious if there was already a spur off of it or not. I didn't remember. I haven't ever been up really in that close to it.
I do not believe so. Just down by the iron and metal.
Brandy, notices were sent to adjoining property owners.
Yep.
Did we receive any comments from any of the adjoining property owners?
No, we did not.
I just guess from my perspective, the property has been inadequately zoned through the 29 years I've been associated with planning and zoning in the city. I believe we addressed this in the land use plan, that this currently C2 and R2A would eventually become I1. This is just the first step in that process. It makes perfect sense. There's to be a tool cutting, die cutting place in the front half of that building, and an electronics business in the south half of that building. Very familiar with the area. To me, it makes good sense. Technically, the structure and the use, if it was similar uses today, would be non-conforming and not allowed. So I think, in my opinion, I think it's a good choice to make it an I1 district.
I'd agree with that. I mean, it aligns with the current and the historic use of the lot, so we're not substantially changing things by changing the zoning designation, just aligning it with the historic uses, and it does align with the comprehensive land use plan.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Director Von Eye here. I just wanted to chime in. I think Commissioner Hanson pointed out the biggest conflict, if you will, that staff had thinking through this rezone is that the immediate adjacency to the R2A. I completely agree with the applicant's thoughts on, these particular buildings, the structures, they're immediately adjacent to I-1 surrounding these lots. I just, I don't know what the answer is, but some level of sensitivity in figuring out what to do with that adjacency to the R2A, I think is really the only pause that staff would express for the board to consider. I know we've had other similar situations where you have heavy industrial going in next to residential, and we've, depending on what area of town it's in, some of those areas we've heard frequently from those residents in the past. Some of them, of course, immediately adjacent to a rail spur that we've all dealt with recently. And there's not a rail spur going in here that we know of, but those are the situations we as a community obviously want to avoid. If there's a situation or a fix or a solution in this case, I just wanted to throw that comment out for what it was worth to just express that in regards to those residents to the south.
I'm going to presume that prior to all of us in this room in 1992, the C2's designation was probably acted in a way to act as something of a transition zone from that R2A development. However, I think those of us that are familiar with that part of town, those uses are probably going to be looking at transitioning over time. When we take a look at everything else around it, whether it's the C3 to the south or the other I1 that's to the east, I would say, and with the existing uses, more than likely that will become industrial, and that's I think why we looked at that with the land use plan. It's a growing pain. And this is what happens when we transition. I would think that theoretically, if they were to come in down the road and ask for a building permit, it looks like the structure is probably non-conforming due to the west property line as far as the setback. So we would have to see them anyway, at which time then, if we needed to put up some buffers or extra screening to the residential properties to the south, you'll have another bite at that apple.
So going forward, and again, I'm not necessarily opposed to the I district, but I guess my concern is if we change it to I, we don't have any, we can't put conditions on it to limit their hours of operation, or I guess, again, that's kind of my concern, is that that we're gonna have a, you know, a noise issue or a traffic issue at, you know, odd hours that's not real conducive to those, residential.
There are still standards in that I-1 district that they, like the no outdoor storage, and then the noise parameter, that still applies to I-1. Not I-2 necessarily, but I-1 it does.
Brandy or Stacy, I don't know off the top of my head, but is there a step in the process that could trigger any kind of buffering or screening or things of that nature? Would that solely, from this point on, because it's a developed site, would that solely be them coming in for a building permit? Or are there other means to trigger those types of requirements between an I-1 and a residential?
It really depends, I think, on what their use is and what they're wanting to do in the future. If those uses were to change, one of the things we looked at the staff level, traditionally you would like to see some form of separation or some kind of transition zone. In this particular instance, it's kind of a tough piece of property because you have that enclave of established residential there, and you also have the established industrial. So we looked at, you know, would the C3 be a better fit to rezone all of those properties, because there would be more conditional uses, per se, but I don't know if that meets the original intent of what the applicant is hoping for. So there is an avenue to go there that's a little less intense than the I-1 district itself. So that was the only other thing we could even think of that may provide for a bit more of a transitional zone to the I-1.
My problem is I think the C3 zone is just that. It's supposed to be a highway commercial district, and that the traffic volumes, and this isn't a highway, and the types of uses that you have there aren't always, you know, germane to this district as well. So I think we as a community have determined that this is going to be industrial at some point in time, and we just need to figure out a way to transition to do what we said that we were going to do when we adopted the land use plan.
And I would like just to point out quick, I mean, if you look at that list that Brandy put up there in the C2, none of the businesses that are there fit in that. It might say C2 on top of that, but that has never been a C2 area. It's always been acted as an I-1. And like you said, the plan says it. I think that it probably should, but that's why I'm here. So
I mean, theoretically, if the phone company got hit by a tornado, they wouldn't be able to do what they're doing there because it's a non-conforming use. They'd be coming back and asking to do industrial.
Does the Eachin property, does that satisfy I-1 requirements in terms of size? I mean, we're going to end up down the road where we've got a non-conforming lot anyways, or a spot zone, right?
Right. And
I mean,
at least
assuming
you
that
have,
that's the direction we head.
and you have C3 there where the Elks Lodge is. So
Yeah.
if Eachin would go C3 with Kemp being a collector route, I don't know, but it also abuts the I-1 and is right adjacent to the railroad. So
I just was curious. I mean, we can cross that bridge when it comes.
I think we cross that bridge, and I think C3 goes away, and we create a nodal commercial district that makes more sense than a heavy intensive highway district there. That just becomes a policy thing for us to do.
I agree.
And I think if we were looking at more of a greenfield scenario too, in relation to the residential and industrial, it'd be a different question here. But when you've got two established uses already adjacency to each other, and we're not substantially changing the use that's already in place and that's historically been in place. So I think just aligning to the land use plan is appropriate. I do have the public hearing open if there's anybody else to speak on behalf or against, or if anybody's got additional questions for the agent here. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time.
there a motion?
Mr. Chair, make a
Any additional-
motion to recommend approval of the resolution 2021-50 to the City of Watertown City Council.
Second, Colhane.
Motion by Kays and a second by Colhane. Any additional discussion before we take a vote on this item? All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
All right. Kays,
Aye.
Dolly,
Yes?
Colhane,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
All in favor? That motion passes. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is the open public comments. I don't believe we had anybody to sign up or speak that is in the room there or online. Move on to item 8, which is new business.
none that I have.
Item 9, old business.
Also. The what?
We can cover that at a later time unless the board would like to hear about, it's an update on the House of Dreams, is that correct? Would you guys like to hear that? Okay.
I'm intrigued.
No.
No, it's I think Commissioner Ford is the one that asked about it originally, but I think there was just a question about the status of the appeal that was taken from the action of the Board of Adjustment a couple of years ago. There was, and I don't know if somebody can maybe identify so it was related to the House of Dreams. I'm not sure the exact address. Long story short, there was a year's worth of inactivity on the plaintiff's behalf, and our attorneys moved to have the case dismissed, and the judge disagreed, and that was a year ago, and there's been nothing that's happened since. So it's still an active case, but I suspect we'll ask again in the near future to have that dismissed for lack of prosecution. No, if you recall, there was Brandy can maybe identify the property, but it's the House of Dreams on Highway 81. And there's a long history to that property, of course, and I think the actual action of the board that was appealed from was the board's gave the applicant a choice to either tear down the canopy that was installed or remove a shed. That was the choice. That was the action that the board took, and that was the action that was appealed from. And so when they did file the appeal on the 30th day after the action, and that stayed in the enforcement from the city's perspective, and now that's been 2 years ago, roughly. So I expect again that our attorney, we're represented by Richardson Law Firm in Aberdeen on this matter, and I expect we'll be seeking to have the case dismissed again in the near future. But that's the status.
And when you say dismissed, their action is dismissed and the action of the city is to be taken care of. They are supposed to be in comport with what we said they need to do.
Correct. Yeah, once the action is no longer the ruling or the action of the board can be then enforced.
So at this particular time, we would just need to wait on any enforcement matters until the case is decided or dismissed.
Related to the action that was appealed from, if there are other issues that have been identified, then
Okay.
that would be a separate matter.
Okay.
Also, quickly, since Matt, you're here, I just happened to hear on the radio today that we've had 2 applications for medical cannabis facilities. Are those both dispensaries? I guess I haven't followed up on that.
Correct. Medical cannabis dispensaries.
And so just for everybody's understanding, we won't be seeing that at the planning commission level because the zoning is a permitted use. And so staff will be reviewing the zoning aspect of it, and then the council will be addressing the licensing.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep.
All right.
Matt, back
Thank
to
you, Mr. Roby.
the House of Dreams. So when we're in dispute or litigation with that, it seems like they've then also since then been issued a building permit. Does the city have any teeth in that to say we won't issue anything else until we get this resolved, or was that an oversight, or what's policy or procedure?
I don't know precisely the nature of the building permit that was issued.
Replace the deck.
I think I can help you with that. I believe that was in the front, and it was just finishing some steps. And so it wasn't actually anything to do with the nonconformities that existed, but it was in the front. And I think since those improvements have been completed or are nearing completion.
I think it was Commissioner Hanson asked that. To that question, Commissioner Hanson, I would just add too that I would with staff internally here, get with Matt to kind of follow up on what you're posing. Should we be continuing to issue ongoing permits for that site with this pending litigation and in response from the prior decisions that were made? I would say that, I don't want to say it was an oversight, but during the transition of building officials and building staff and everything that happened here the last year, I do know that is when that permit went out the door. So I do suspect that had we had that conversation, I don't know whether we would have not issued the permit, but I think that's a fair question to ask and something we should look into as staff.
My recommendation
definitely an
is if we need a
interesting
policy from a planning commission perspective or a board of adjustment action, I think anybody that's out of compliance with the zoning regulations should not be able to get a building permit until they can bring their properties up to code or come before the board and ask for some sort of compensation for that.
And I would just add on this particular matter, if I recall, it was, this property goes back, I think the issues with the Board of Adjustment on this property go back maybe 10 years, perhaps. I think the original, or not the original, but one of the more recent actions of the board was to say, okay, here's your site plan. Any changes to this site plan need to be approved by this board. And that's what was violated last time. And so I guess to the extent that those steps didn't change the footprint, perhaps it may not have mattered. But Commissioner Kays, I understand that yes, if there is an outstanding issue that hasn't been resolved, it probably makes sense to have a hold on any further building permits.
Yeah, I'm sure we're not the first community that's had that question either, so it'd be interesting to see what other precedent there is in state law or other communities.
I agree. I think it would be helpful for the general public and then also for staff and the board to know what the policy is on that and if we need to research that and look into that further. Thank you, Attorney Roby. We really appreciate your update.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Thanks.
Moving on, any reason for executive session?
No.
All right, with that, we're adjourned.